Are you scared?
Yes.
You don't have to worry about me.
I like worrying about you.
Hi folks, I'm Ignatiy Vishnevetsky.
And I'm Alex Dowd.
This week we're in the Undercover studio here at the AV Club office.
Welcome to Film Club. So I have a theory about Midnight Special.
All right, let's hear it.
The new Jeff Nichols film. The theory is that how you feel about this film, how affected you are by this film, is going to largely be determined by whether or not you have children.
I think it hits so many things about parenthood, and I have children. This is
You have
true.
children.
And
I
I
do
like
not.
this, and I like this film more than you do.
You do.
Nichols nails certain things about parental responsibility, you could say, in a very authentic way, but in a very subtle way. You've got Michael Shannon. He's playing this guy, Roy Tomlinson, who's a former member of a cult, which is only referred to as the Ranch. He and this friend named Lucas, who's played by Joel Edgerton, they are evading government forces as well as the goons of the Ranch with Roy's son, Alton, who has some kind of supernatural powers. And yeah, it's a very, very well-developed kind of sci-fi metaphor. You have this child that the father literally can't understand. He's literally connected to some kind of unseen future world, and that he at the same time has to protect, and he's protecting him from his own bad childhood, because he grew up in the cult, and now he's trying to save him from them.
It works
A thriller.
fantastically, I think, as a genre piece. And one thing I do love about this film is that this is a film that wastes no time on exposition we don't need. And this is a film that trusts the audience to sort of catch up to where the characters are. And it starts very excitingly. I mean, we get a set piece in the opening minutes, you know, them racing down the highway.
Nichols has always had a distinctive eye. He likes these big, empty landscapes. He likes empty highways. Well, his frames are mostly empty space. And it's a very distinctive sensibility. But here, it sort of gets put to use in a way that brings to mind John Carpenter. So you'll have a lone car racing in the suspensefully empty country road. You'll have an ominously empty sky. So he's sort of using the visual hallmarks of his style to make a very tightly constructed genre piece.
Yeah. One of my issues with the film, and I would like to underline again that I like this film quite a bit, is that the kid to me never stops feeling kind of like a plot device. To have been affecting in the way that I think that it wants to be affecting, at least for me, I think I would have needed to understand this relationship between
You
them
would
a
have
little
needed
bit
the
better.
kid to be less of
Of a MacGuffin.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
he
he's
sort
also,
of feels like
but
a
he's
MacGuffin.
also a collection of all these other metaphors for childhood.
Because even Steven Spielberg, and that's another filmmaker, you mentioned John Carpenter.
Yes, Carpenter's an influence here, I think, in terms of style, but thematically, I mean, this is Spielberg territory.
Absolutely. But I think it's one of the better sort of Spielberg tributes that I've seen in a while, because it's one that sort of gets at some of the essence of his filmmaking as opposed to just reproducing his visual language. I mean, even with something like E.T., Spielberg makes E.T. a character in a way that I'm not sure Nichols makes the kid in Midnight Special a character.
Spielberg will always sell you the kid.
Yes.
You know, he knows how to sell the shit out of a kid. And I don't think Nichols is interested in that.
Something interesting about his films is that I often feel like he's more interested in environment and details of character and place than he is in plot. But this is a very tightly plotted film, I think, and this is possibly his best film, in part because he really has done a lot of the work in developing this as a story.
Do you think that's partly because it's so minimalist? There's so many things you don't learn at all about the characters.
Yes, well, that creates a sense of mystery for the audience, too. It creates a sense of wanting to know who these people are, and the film kind of strings you along in that respect. He's very smart about what he reveals through dialogue and what he reveals organically. There are a lot of filmmakers who would bombard us with exposition, and Nichols isn't interested in doing that at all.
How did you feel about the climax of this film without giving too much away?
In terms of what happens and in terms of where the story goes, it's sort of exactly what the movie needs. I think in terms of execution, I'm less enamored. Again, I'm being very careful because I really don't want to talk about details of the climax, but he's sort of visualizing something that I think is maybe more interesting if we don't see it. I think under ideal circumstances, this is a movie that you walk in with no foreknowledge, because the opening scenes, it's very unclear what exactly the relationship between these two adult men and this child is. Those opening minutes are very skillful in being like, are these men predators? Do they have this kid's best interests in mind?
Speaking of movies that are best seen with as little foreknowledge as possible, 10 Cloverfield Lane.
And I think there are some parallels here. I mean, they're very different films in a lot of respects, but I think they're right that they're both playing a little bit with some of the conventions that Spielberg Spielberg has introduced into blockbuster filmmaking and into genre filmmaking. This is the quasi-spiritual sequel to Cloverfield.
We should say pseudo-spiritual
Well,
sequel.
this is where it gets tricky, though, because you start getting into what can you discuss and what can't you discuss, which is sort of the Abrams special at this point. It started as a film called The Cellar, and the basic setup of the plot was the same. This woman is in a car crash, and she wakes up, and she's in this underground bunker, and there's this survivalist character, in this case played by John Goodman, and he basically says the world above the bunker is inhospitable, and I'm keeping you down here for your own safety. And the film turns into this sort of mystery of motivation. Is he crazy, or is he right?
Now, Damien Chazelle, who wrote and directed Whiplash, did a rewrite on this script.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like his fingerprints are all
over it.
And especially in the depiction of the Goodman character of Howard,
Right.
who is this kind of a taskmaster, kind of overbearing, but there's something pathetic and therefore I think sympathetic about him.
Yeah, I think you spend a lot of the movie trying to parse this character's motivations and trying to figure out, am I looking at somebody who's just a monster, or is there method to his madness? And I think that's what Whiplash is all about, and I think that's what this is about to some extent. But I think that the film's relationship to its marketing campaign is important in some respects, because it was basically retrofitted with the Cloverfield title. And beyond the fact that that title alone creates certain expectations that audiences are going to want paid off, I think it also probably had some effect on the climax, another thing that we can't really discuss.
10 Cloverfield Lane, I feel like just from a, you could say from a formal standpoint, it's a film of, to me, a lot of kind of wasted opportunities. There's sort of some neat things that it's doing with this bunker space, which almost the entire film takes place in, the space of which is still very, very hard to figure out from the film.
Yeah, Dan Trachtenberg, who's the first-time director who made 10 Cloverfield Lane, I feel like he doesn't exploit the promising limitations of that space in the way he could.
It's unfortunate that you have this movie that is all about relationships between characters, where very rarely do you have any kind of visual relationship between them in the frame. He's usually just like cutting between singles of these people.
I think he shows why he got the gig in the part of the movie that we can't discuss.
The climax, which does break style.
I mean, it breaks style, it breaks tone, it breaks everything, and you could argue that that's a deliberate choice and that that's the appropriate place for this movie to go. For me, I was disappointed that what had felt to me like a pretty modest but effective pressure cooker thriller had to become something else.